let's start. Good morning. We're in Parashat MIshpatim, and as I promised, the Shiur would be on Naase Venishma. But since I gave a Shiur on Shabbat afternoon in Hebrew about judicial reform in halachic aspects, I'll separate this Shiur into two parts, and the second half would be on that Shiur for those who want to understand it in English as well. So the first half would be on Naase Venishma, as we know, and I'll upload it. Just a minute. Yeah, so we have here on Perek Kaf Dalet, the last Perek of Parashat MIshpatim, which is full of details. The last Perek says, "Ve'el Moshe Amar Alei Hashem, Ata ve'Aaron, Nadav ve'Avihu, ve'Shivim Ziknei Israel." So we have a second part of Ma'amad Har Sinai. We have a lot of descriptions of Ma'amad Har Sinai all over Sefer Dvarim, Vayitchanan, Ekev, but it's just a chazara, a repetition. And here, good morning to Mr. Fixler, and here we have a divided second part of Ma'amad Har Sinai, and we have to understand why. Good morning, Mr. Fixler. So we see when Moshe Amar Alei Hashem, Ata ve'Aaron, Nadav ve'Avihu, we come back to the to Perek Yutet before Ma'amad Har Sinai, and then we have here ויבוא משה ויספר לעם את כל דברי השם ואת כל המשפטים, ויען כל העם כל אחד ויאמרו כל הדברים אשר דיבר השם נעשה. ויכתוב משה את כל דברי השם, וישכם בבוקר, ויבן מזבח תחת ההר. So we don't know that from Parashat Yitro. Moshe didn't build the מזבח then. וישלח את נערי העולות וכו' וכו'. ואז ויקח משה חצי האדם, וישם בהגנות. Moshe takes half of the amount of blood, puts in the vessel, וחצי האדם זרק על המזבח, ויקח ספר הברית, ויקרא באוזני העם, ויאמרו כל אשר דיבר השם נעשה ונשמע. So we have here the famous נעשה ונשמע, and we have ויקח ספר הברית. Okay? So pay attention to the phrase ספר הברית, and from then on, הקדוש ברוך הוא says, הנה דם הברית, אשר קראת השם עמכם, על כל הדברים האלה. Okay? So we have Ma'amad Har Sinai one time in Parashat Yitro, which is a big Ma'amad with a lot of fog and noise, etc., and called shofar. But here it's the statue of Ma'amad Har Sinai, the status of Ma'amad Har Sinai is Sefer HaBrit, and it's a covenant. And we have to understand Ma'amad Har Sinai in Perek Kaf Dalet in the Parashat MIshpatim with the phrase Naase Venishma in the shade of the covenant. You know that in law, in any system of law, it doesn't matter whether it's civil law or American law, Roman law, or halachic law, you must have the source out of the rules themselves. What do I mean? Let's say that you want to cross the light, the traffic light in red light, and you know that it's forbidden. So where is it forbidden? So you see, you go to the municipality rules, and one of the rules says that you shouldn't drive in the red light. Okay, what's the source? How can the mayor decide that I shouldn't cross in red light? Because it's called at least in Hebrew, I assume that in other systems as well, it's called Chakikat Mishneh, okay, meaning secondary legislation. Why? Because the primary legislation, the Chok Rashi, is not in the municipality rules, is in the Knesset rules. The Knesset rules says that Sar HaTachbura, the Minister of Transport, might decide on takanot, on secondary legislation, and his takanot will be available in all the cities. And the mayor might of Yerushalayim might adopt these takanot, and therefore it will be require you, and if you violate them, you have to pay a penalty. So the source of listening to the mayor is based on the primary legislation in Chakika Rashit in the Knesset. And then you ask, who decided? Now, a lot of people ask, who decided that you should? It's related to the reform as well, to the judicial reform as well. Yeah, you might ask, who decided that the Knesset decides? Okay, who said that the Knesset has a role to decide? We have the same problem in Halacha. Why? Because you know that we have a mitzvah of tshuva. Before Rosh Hashanah, on the last Parshiot of Sefer Dvarim, we read about the tshuva in Nitzavim at length. And a lot of the Meforshim ask, the Minchat Chinuch and a lot of others, how can you tell me to do, not how, but what's the significance of telling me to do it again? You told me once, don't say Lashon Hora. Okay, so I don't have to say Lashon Hora. But I violated it because I have a taiva to talk with you, and I violated it. So what's the significance if the Torah writes it again at the same system, at the same Taryag Mitzvot, at the same Sefer Torah, that if you violated and said Lashon Hora, you might do tshuva. But as I violated Lashon Hora, so I violated doing tshuva on Lashon Hora. In other words, if you tell me to renew myself, to start in a way, you should come from a different perspective. That's why, you know, in the Midrashim, they say that tshuva kadma la'olam, meaning to say that it has a primary source from which it requires you, it talks to you without just being one of the Taryag Mitzvot, because being one of the Taryag Mitzvot doesn't help you at all. Okay, so a lot of the Meforshim ask, why is tshuva relevant bichlal as a part of among the other Taryag Mitzvot? What's the significance of it? And you must say the significance of tshuva comes from a primary source, because if it comes from the same source, so okay, yes, so you write it twice. I violated the first or violated the second. And we have the same thing with mitzvat ha'emunah as well. You know that there is a famous machloket between the Rambam and Ramban whether to count mitzvat ha'emunah or not, because if mitzvat ha'emunah, the mitzvat ha'emunah is the base of everything. Without mitzvat ha'emunah tells me that there is a king, I have to obey to him. Once there is a king, I'll obey to his Taryag mitzvah. But the primary mitzvah of obeying cannot be one of the mitzvot, because you should tell me why should I listen bichlal at all to you. Okay, so that's a big machloket between the Rambam and Ramban. How can I write the mitzvah ta'emunah as a part of one of the mitzvot? One of them thinks that no, you should make the mitzvah ta'emunah as a base to everything. Kablu mitzvotai, kablu malchuti, and then kablu mitzvotai. But the other one says, no, I can somehow, I won't discuss it now, it's in the Rambam and it's Shorashim of Sefer HaMitzvot. How can you decide that mitzvah ha'emunah is still a mitzvah? And we have the same thing with here. By listening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have come for the first time to the really primary source from which do I have to decide to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's true that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made me a lot of nisim and miracles and took me out of Mitzrayim and kara li et hayam. Okay, but just being based on the history is very weak. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to state a covenant with Am Yisrael. But what is the source of this covenant? Why should it be effective? If why should I listen to you? So it's very clear to hear that it's based on askamat ha'umah, meaning to say that just because Am Yisrael there in that generation decided to agree to a Kadosh Baruch Hu's application and to respond to it and to admit it. Therefore, it's Hakadosh Baruch Hu said what he said in Ma'amad Har Sinai, and then it became a covenant, and that's why that's a big source of Naase Venishma. Naase Venishma is not just the pshat as we usually understand that they said, I listen everything you say. Whatever you say, I listen. I mamash a slave of you. I don't mind what you say. I believe in you. The Ma'amad Har Sinai is more than that. The Naase Venishma symbolizes that I believe in you, meaning to say that I decide that you are my partner. Okay? That's the chashivut of Ma'amad Har Sinai. You are my partner. Since I kablu malchuti, I mekabel your kingdom, I decide that you are my king. Therefore, you can now establish or decide on various mitzvahs. But it comes later. This primary source must be Kabbalat Ha'umah. The same thing happens with any constitution. You know that in the United States, or as Rousseau's the social covenant, okay? It means, or according to Hobbes, as I said on Shabbat, the Hobbes said in his Whale, in his famous philosophical book, that a human being is a wolf to a wolf, Adam le Adam ze'ev, and is bad. One person to another might be bad because they want to overcome, they want to conquer, they want to take his own part. But human beings, a lot of human beings understand that once I am alone and you're alone is bad, and once being alone might be a war all over. That's why we decide, it's a social covenant that we all decide to forego our rights and to decide that I appoint you, or you'll be the Vad, you'll be my representative, and you will decide on a constitution, on a mutual judicial system that will require and be mechayev all of us. We decided, we created, and it's very important that the nation creates their constitution. It happens in the United States, okay? It happens in the French Revolution. It happens anywhere. And therefore here in Eretz Israel, Ki'ilu, when they came from the diaspora, so they gave Ben Gurion and his Mo'etzet Ha'am, they decided that he represents them, okay? And you have to, from a philosophical perspective, you might invent an event that we have decided, because nobody came to Ben Gurion, told him, I'm sending you, I'm appointing you to Shaliach to make my constitution. It's foolish. But by being gathered in 48 around all the enemies from around, so we might invent Ke'ilu as if there was an event, and in this event, all the people who were in Eretz Israel decided to empower Ben Gurion to make the Knesset, to make a constitution. That we don't have constitution, to make the laws. That's the Kabbalat Ha'umah. And here there is a very, very important thing that the Rav Kook says it. You know that the Rav Kook has many books. One of the books is called Eder Hayakar, and Eder Hayakar based on his choten, his father-in-law, who was a famous Rav in Yerushalayim, the Aderet. Okay, so he used the pasuk Eder Hayakar, and he called Aderet. He describes the life of his father-in-law. It consists a lot of history facts of his father-in-law, but it has some machshovedik ideas. And here, the Rav Kook says something very important, very, very, very important. תדע, שהרי, put it here, תדע, שהרי אנחנו מקיימים באהבה מנהגי ישראל, שאנו יודעים שלא נצטווינו בהם על פי שום נבואה, והכל מפני חיבתה של אומתנו, אהבתה וכבודה החביב עלינו בחיבה של קדושה אלוהית עליונה. We fulfill sometimes minhagim that we know that they weren't given to Moshe in Sinai. They came from 700 years ago, 1000 years ago. And we live with them. וכן כל מצוות חכמים שאנחנו מקיימים, like נטילת ידיים, like חנוכה, like מקרא מגילה, היסוד העיקרי שלהם הוא קבלת הגוי כולו. Okay, so the decision of the whole Knesset Israel. And as we know, in Mount Sinai, they didn't stand just the 600,000 that stood there, but the whole nation, שהיא כבוד האומה, והשפעתה ההיסטורית הנצחית האלוהית החביבה, אוקיי? שכל מה שהיא מתעתקת יותר, היא מתחבבת ומתגלה בתוכה, יותר הרצון והצביון הכללי של האומה בכללה. אף על גב דאסמכינו רבנן לא תסור, as the Gemara says in שבת, מכל מקום היסוד הברור הוא קבלת האומה. אוקיי? So, Rav Kook says that the whole basis of Kabbalat HaTorah is the decision of the whole nation. And you know, now we have an interpretation to the Chazal's Maimar that we say that all the neshomas of Am Yisrael stood in Ma'amad Har Sinai. Usually we understand that Bamash, you know, metaphysically somehow we all stood on Mount Sinai. Okay, there is a Atar Shiduchim in English that we used to be called We Met in Sinai. Because we stood there, all the neshamot there. But now we can understand that Chazal doesn't refer, literally speaking, that we all the souls stood in Mount Sinai. Chazal wants to symbolize judicially how you can establish a system of law. What is a mechayev to listen to a Kadosh Baruch Hu? Because you shouldn't build it just on history. You have to decide, judicial decision of the nation, of all the nation. As I said, it might be that, you know, during 48, just 10,000 people knew what Ben Gurion was doing, but it doesn't matter. Being here and agreeing to the government that was there, so we agree that they have the power to establish law system, and therefore the Kabbalat HaUmah is the base of all Ma'amad Har Sinai. So in Parashat Yitro we see the details, the 10 commandments, but we don't see the basic agreement. We see the Naase in Perek Yutet. Kol asher diber Hashem Naase, as we saw even in Perek Kaf Daled, a petition of it. But here Naase Venishma is the base of everything. And in a newer book, Rav Kook had a book called Lenevuchei Hador. It's a book that came out just 10-15 years ago. Somebody gathered all his ma'amarim and wrote a book out of it. And Rav Kook there sharpens what he says here. And he says something very interesting. If you take it for granted that the base of the Torah Shebichtav and listening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and all the 613 mitzvot is just based on the listening to the decisions, the decision to listen, the decision to admit, the decision to honor HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, so Torah shebe'al peh precedes Torah shebichtav. Okay? Because usually we understand that Torah shebichtav is the laws, the rules of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we can extrapolate it, we can think it over, and all the Gemara, all the Rishonim decide what it usually means. So it's very clear that we are the secondary sources, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu is the primary one. But saying that we are the primary source of listening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so it's Torah shebe'al peh, the decision here is more basic than the rules at HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu can say whatever he wants, but if nobody listens from the other side, so it doesn't have a judicial decision, judicial significance. Okay, he can destroy the world, he can make a mabul, he can make whatever he wants, but in order that it would be a covenant, we have to establish it. And therefore, I gave a shiurim this week on the Rav Hutner's Shita. He says in several places something very, very interesting. We find in Gemara, in various places, that there is in Mishnah, that we have a shvua of MIshpatim. You know, that somebody comes to you and telling you, sell me the house. And you told him it's 2 million. And then you think it over and you want more. So we find several maasiyot in the Talmud that somebody came to a person, and it was in the middle of Kriyat Shema. He told him send me something. He thought of a price, but didn't say anything because it was the middle of Kriyat Shema. And then he didn't answer. So the one thought that the first one doesn't agree. So he said more than that. And after finishing Kriyat Shema and Shmoneh Esrei, he came back to him and said, no. I'll sell it to you in the former price that you suggested, because I decided to sell it to you by then. And I didn't answer you just because of the halachic problem of Kriyat Shema. And we have MIshpatim midor hamabul, hu yipara ממי שאינו עומד בלשונו. Okay? So we have a shvuah, lashon of swear, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, since he punished the generation of the Mabul, he'll take his punishment from those people who don't know how to stand behind what they have said. Okay? And Rav Hutner asks, usually we understand that like midat tova, a good virtue, that a person should adhere to what he says and doesn't contradict it, and just be an honest person. But Rav Hutner explains that that's exactly the same thing. By making business with you, before we decide the price, before we decide the details, before we make a contract, I have to believe in you. Okay? You know that if you write a contract between two people and they don't believe in you, so even if you have the best lawyer, they'll find what to do, and they'll just, you know, that when Gantz and Bibi made an agreement 2 years ago, they took the best lawyers to make, because they didn't trust him, and they took the best lawyer to write how the government will be between two. And Bibi find there one sentence that how can he blow up the whole thing, and פוצץ את הממשלה, and from then on it's just a matter of history. So if you don't believe in somebody, nothing would help you. And if you believe, that's what establishes the kesher, the chozeh, the contract will come just later. And that's why Rav Hutner says that at Kiyat Kaf of the Socharim, sometimes we see in the Talmud that they, they shake hands. We know it in, some people have it as a minhag. Usually people who deal with diamonds, they have just the shake hands. When they shake hands, it says the deal is over. What does it mean? It means that we believe one in another person. And if we believe one in another person, that establishes the shvuah. And another source, and that's why we have the source of MIshpatim. It's not just a good virtue to speak truth. When you don't speak the truth and you don't establish the belief in the other person, so what comes later is meaningless. And Rav Utner says it again on another issue. We know in Nedorim, Daf Chet, we learned it in Daf Yomi not a long time ago. So the Gemara says that somebody, if he says, I swear to be meniach tefillin, so there is no significance to what he says, because mushba ve'omed mehar Sinai. So what does the Gemara says? Usually the Ran explains that there is no meaning of swearing to make the mitzvah, because I have sworn in Ma'amad Har Sinai when I decided to lekabel the mitzvot, so it consists of all the 613, therefore I have to be meniach tefillin. But Rav Utner asks, what does it mean? I have seen a lot of things in the Torah or in Ma'amad Har Sinai, but I haven't seen a shvuah. There is no shvuah. Can you learn Parashat Yitro, learn Parashat MIshpatim? Can you find a place in which it's shvuah? I don't know. I didn't see the shvuah. So Rav Utner explains that that's exactly the same thing. That Chazal, by saying that it's shvuah, mushba ve'omed Ma'amad Har Sinai, didn't really think that there was a shvuah. But they saying that the base of the covenant, the base of on which Am Yisrael and the Kadosh Baruch Hu stands, and Am Yisrael has to listen to his king, is just deciding to coronate the king, decided that he is the base of everything. And by saying that, we understand that Ma'amad Har Sinai was not only just a Ma'amad in which we got a lot of rules. Ma'amad Har Sinai was more important because it was the base of the covenant. It was a Kabbalat HaUmah. It was the decision to listen to Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's a כאילו שבועה. That's כאילו זה מחייב, כן? אנחנו חייבנו את עצמנו. We empowered את הקדוש ברוך הוא to be our king. That's the empowerment that happened in Ma'amad Har Sinai is a Torah שבעל פה that preceded the Torah שבכתב. And therefore, we understand from Rav Kook what he writes here, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's rules, 613 rules, are בעצם bent to our decision. That's why by admitting and agreeing to listen to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we establish everything, and we are the source of everything. So, Ke'ilu, we see in Sefer Yechezkel that Am Yisrael comes and says that we don't want HaKadosh Baruch Hu anymore, and he has left the earth, and okay, we have a Gerushin, we have divorced from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then Yechezkel answers very sharply, Ha'oleh al da'atchem, hayo lo tihye, בחמלה שפוכה, אם לא חליכם ביד חזקה. And he says that you shouldn't think of what you think, because there is no a possibility now to disconnect, because he understands that once you started with the Kabbalat HaUmah, you are, we called it in Hebrew, we have the word mesandel. It's like to manacle. You manacle yourself, and you decide that you cannot come back, because once you come back, a covenant is not something that you decide, okay, I don't want to establish it. Today I got up on the wrong side, so no longer it's established. It. No, Kabbalah is something that you have to go with it, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells you it obliges me and it obliges you, okay? And you shouldn't get out of it as I cannot get out of it. And that's what Moshe would say in Parshat Kitisa, in many places, that Lama Yomru Mitzrayim, and he'll talk about the Chilul Hashem, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ke'ilu Mechuyav to Am Yisrael, to everything. Now I see that we have 8 minutes to finish. So I'll talk about what I've said on the Shabbat, very, very, very in short. It's relevant to Parashat MIshpatim, so let's do a part of it. I wanted to say during Shabbat, I just look for the Mismach, okay, that we have 4 issues in this judicial reform. We have the wish to change who appoints the judges. Okay, nowadays the judges of the Supreme Court appoint themselves, decide themselves who will decide in which topic. And now the Knesset wants to change it, that the Knesset will take the rule or the Bchirat Shoftim itself would be based on a decision of Rov of the Knesset, not like today that it's not just the Rov of the Shoftim, but they can veto. And if they don't want somebody, they say, I don't want, and that's it. And we said on Shabbat that the main problem, I'm not discussing it judicially, but halachically, the main problem in letting some mumche, some expert, to be your supreme entity is that, first of all, he wasn't elected. And it's back to what we say now. The base of judicial system is the Askamat HaUma. If we come and decide, elect to the Knesset, so our representative, whoever they are, is like a representation of me, of you, of everybody. And we have a social agreement that what they decide symbolizes what the majority thinks or majority feel. Once you have an expert, a judge, if he's an expert, even though he is an expert, I didn't choose him. If he makes mistakes, that's another issue. With a MP, I can change it. Okay? He has some achrayut, responsibility to what he does. If he's not good, if he's not a good Sar Otzar, so I'll sweep him, I'll change him. But with a judge, I cannot do it. I have to wait to his retirement. So that's why we don't give responsibility to experts who don't have responsibilities. They don't have responsibility to what they do. Because if the Supreme Court says that in South Tel Aviv, you shouldn't kick out the Mistanenim, the people who came from Sudan, and the Supreme Court doesn't have to live with them, okay? The judges don't live in South Tel Aviv, so they don't have responsibility. But the Rosh HaMamshala, the MPs, they have a responsibility because they'll have to deal with the Toshavim of South Tel Aviv. And that's why you have priority to somebody who is elected by you, first of all, because of the judicial system. Secondly, because he has responsibility. And we've talked about the Sanhedrin. In Ezrat Hashem, the world after the Mashiach comes, and we have the Sanhedrin back. So they'll have to decide a lot of halachot that now the Supreme Court does, and the same question will be them. They are very big chachomim in Teireh, but why do we have to give them a priority to decide more than others? Okay, so let's say that the first reason against them doesn't exist, because the first reason against the judges was that I didn't elect them. But since Sanhedrin is elected by HaKadosh Baruch Hu or by the Ummah, as we said, so it symbolizes Am Yisrael, and we don't think that there is a problem of representation. But the second question is still relevant. They decide several decisions and they don't have the priority, it's a responsibility, sorry. So I gave some examples like Reb Osher Weiss, that some people asked him about Nizkei Shchenim, okay, that I come and make my machsan into an apartment and rent it out. And, it disturbs you because now from, instead of 10 shchenim in the building, we have 11. So there is no actually a source in halacha to that, to forbid it. And then he said, that actually there is no reason to forbid it, and it's okay between Ben Adam Lechavero, and the neighbors shouldn't say anything bad to the 11th neighbor. But Rav Moshe Weiss didn't relate to the problems with the municipality. The municipality, when it talks about transport in the German colony, or how many arnona, or how many tenants will be in the shul, and how many ganei eladim will be in the German colony, etc. They decided because they know what's the population, and if you change the population without telling them, so it's a problem, okay? And you don't have the responsibility, because since you are just a poisek, you don't relate to the people. You don't relate to the whole. You said, okay, what between Ben Adam Lechavero, but it's not. It's a minali problem, okay? So you have to understand it's more than that. So I said that Rav Moshe Weiss doesn't have the problem, because once he knows about all the outcome of his decisions, he changes it, and he's very modern in his thought, and he really takes into account all the things that are relevant if he is aware of them. If not, so one should tell him, and he changes. But sometimes it's a problem with what we call the judicial activism, and here we have halachic activism as well, because we change the halacha, we decide something, but we don't have the responsibility. So we gave a lot of examples in the shiur on Shabbat, but the bottom of the line was that there is a big difference between the system of law in civil law and the system of law in halachic law, because in halachic law we strive to get the truth, and therefore we don't have ityashnut. Okay, in civil law, if you apply after 7 years, so we say because it's not relevant anymore. I believe you that it was a truth, but it's not relevant. We take systematic issues. We understand that we cannot let anybody sue. So we say, okay, till 7 years you sue. Afterwards, even if it's true, we don't mind. But in halacha, it's not like this. I assume that once halacha will be the only law in Yemot HaMashiach, and we'll have a lot of suits and everything, like if you believe that in Yemot HaMashiach everybody will be nice and and they won't sue each other, okay. But if we will have normal life, so I think that it will be very, very similar to what we see now. We'll have to establish a lot of decisions that are not halachic, they're just based on the metziut and on the system, and then it will be decisions that you cannot strive for truth anymore. Just after a while, don't sue me. But till then, we have to differentiate between halachi, which strive to truth, and therefore will let more activism, halachic activism, and to civil law, in which we don't let you make judicial activism, because I don't want to give the expert power more than he was given. I give the power just to the people I empowered, the nation, the Knesset, the representatives, not the expert. Even he's the best expert, but he doesn't have the responsibility. We have to finish because Zoom is being